When we think of life, we usually think of the beginning. And oftentimes, the end is a surprise. And I think for many of the artists that we cherish today, the end should not be a surprise. And so today I kind of wanted to kind of just express a feeling of understanding, a feeling of empathy, and kind of lend a hand to navigate what death may feel and be like for an artist. And so, if you're interested in conversations like this, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, especially if you are an artist or have an artist in your life. And so, when I first think of like legends and great artists and people we say we cherish, I often try to look at what they what that may feel like from the perspective of being the cherished one. And so, usually, when I hear conversations that surround, let's say, very popular artists or entertainers or musicians and things like that, people tend to celebrate the things they love about the person, like about the person, or maybe that they may have enjoyed or received from them, like a cool movie or a memorable album or something like that, right? And so oftentimes when that relationship ends, there's heartbreak, there's grief, there's mourning, there's, all kinds of honestly common things that happen with the death of an artist, right? And what we have to kind of consider when we want to enter into the music industry or the entertainment industry is what it's like to be on the receiving end of that experience. And you have to do that early. Now, why is this important to do early? You want to understand what happens post mortem for an artist, meaning after death. And you want to understand how people value you before death. So that way you can at least have the options laid in front of you. So, what do I mean by that? Meaning, I typically see older artists when they have passed away, let's say by natural causes, a common thing, What normally happens is we get an explanation of their life or a description of their life and their experiences, and maybe a catalog of their music and their works and things like that, just to understand who they are and what their value is or relationship and experiences with society, right? But we rarely get to understand what the artist was feeling in their last few moments, meaning like the last maybe 4 or 5 years of their life, um, how they may have reflected, has anything changed, and we kind of encapsulate the person we want them to be or the person we remember them to be at the last moment we saw them. And so when we think about people we cherish, oftentimes we think about the great times, the moments that they gave us that we loved, and the moments that maybe we really appreciated from these people. But in the darkest moments, do we do the same for the people we cherish, or is there some kind of standard that we set for entertainers that we cherish versus entertainers that simply just pass away? And so it's something to think about as an artist because you could feel some type of way if someone, maybe inappropriately addresses another artist's death. Or maybe you may feel some type of way about where your end may be heading. Maybe you are aware. You may feel some type of way about how, in general, we deal with the death of artists. And so, to navigate through that, I wanted to kind of express how my perspective is about learning about it. And so, when you think about how many artists have to go through experiences to be considered great or to be considered, I'm using the word cherished, but I really mean just like valued by their fans, by their community, by society or their genre or their employees and people they work with, whoever, right? When you apply artist or musician to it, there's almost a thin layer of respectability that comes with that. And the reason I say thin because for the most part they're people first. Their mothers, their fathers, their sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, right? And the thing about it is it's hard for us to bring that layer to the forefront when something like death comes into the conversation. Even life, but more so death because the music doesn't matter as much until we have the conversation about that music. And I'm bringing this up also to kind of relate it to another video on this channel where we talked about separating the artist from their lifestyle. And how do we do that in this conversation when it comes to death? So oftentimes, let's say like a legendary, world-renowned artist passes away, right? You'll see celebrations and you'll see mourning and you'll see people taking it very seriously. And then on the other hand, if this person is infamous, meaning we all dislike them or we all have a very good reason to dislike them, you'll see the similar effort just being used towards maybe exposing this person or maybe shaming them or things like that. But is this something that has anything to do with music and entertainment? And is this something that as an artist you should think about or worry about? Now, this kind of popped into my head recently because I was learning about how wills work and things like that and how people move their estates and things like that. But it's really to kind of shine a light on where your mind has to be to kind of wrap it around the concept of your career, your life, your art and your artistry, your talent and skill ending. And do you have a plan for it? Should you have a plan for it? Um, what is your plan? What is the details? And how will it be executed? Can it be executed? Is it realistic? All of these questions we kind of, at least as musicians, we don't think about because it's not at the forefront. But of course, in general, people don't think about this thing because it typically is a shock as far as the event itself. You know, no one plans for it. I mean, most people don't plan for it. But I think when it comes to musicians, I think we kind of don't have that chapter of a conversation. Like we don't have that page to turn until post mortem. And so when you think of any artist that has already passed away, that has been gone, the conversation about them, in my opinion, will be the same going into the future because they have pretty much solidified maybe their catalog of music, maybe our opinion of them, maybe, you know, all of these different things that affect how people perceive you to decide whether or not they value you or cherish you or whether or not they dislike you and should shame you. And so if we were to flip this conversation and start to think about life, then you will start to see the conversation move towards, at least for artists and musicians, well, what decisions should you be making for that chapter of the book or the chapter of, you know, actually becoming an artist or growing as an artist and nurturing yourself as an artist to eventually get and bridge that gap between that chapter of life and that chapter of death to make a complete and total picture that you are in control of. Because oftentimes when we see artists pass away, you know, they're typically just accidents or, you know, bad decisions or just luck and things like that. But we never really equate it to the career until it's something extreme. Like if it's something crazy that's got to do with the law or like, you know, harming a bunch of people or harming themselves or maybe some salacious like tax fraud or something like that, or criminal behavior, when you start to see stuff like that, that's when we start to think, well, maybe these decisions led to this cause and effect moment. But how often do we think about the day to day common decisions we see our artists make, like interacting with us? Uh, that's a big one that I think a lot of artists, I mean, a lot of fans don't really understand, because for the most part, many artists have avoided direct contact with fans as far as having conversations in the comments, or actually having like email threads and forums and discords and things like that. This is fairly new for y'all to be able to like tweet T-Pain and see what he's doing today. Like that's very, very, very new as far as the exponential growth from buying a ticket weeks before the artist is even in your state, hoping that when they get there, you can actually see them. you know, so we've gone from that point to this point very, very quickly. And I think what we have to kind of understand today as artists is, well, how have we seen any change as far as appreciation after we passed away? Because, like I said, some artists will pass and there'll be huge celebrations. Some artists will pass and we will have to kind of find out that it happened. And it's not necessarily, like I said, anything to do with music or their skills or their talent or anything like that. It's just that conversation about artists that rarely happens when the artist is in our face. And so that's kind of what I have today as far as this. This will be a continuing thought process about kind of outlining what death really looks like for an artist and what we kind of want it to look like as a society. Because if we were to think about some of the artists that we truly, truly say we cherish post mortem, I think there was a little bit more, I'll say, parasitic relationships, and there were a lot more of one sided conversations when it came to respect and, I guess, duty to the artist. So if you enjoyed this conversation, let me know. And we will have way more conversations like this going into the future. And I hope you guys are loving the new, mood for the channel. We're getting into some different vibes. Expect a lot more music coming soon. But if you guys do have any interesting questions, place them in the comments. And I will see you guys. Peace.